The distress signal had been crying out into the darkness of space for 11 days. It came from a small mining colony on a planet called Seven, a cold and rocky world at the very edge of known space. The signal was weak and full of static, but its message was clear. "Help us, please, we are dying." The Galactic Council received the signal on the first day. They listened to it. They discussed it. They formed committees to study it, and while they talked, people died. Seven was home to a gentle species that looked like tall birds with soft gray feathers and large, sad eyes. They were miners and farmers, not warriors. They had no weapons, no warships, no way to defend themselves. They had come to this distant world to build a peaceful life away from the dangers of the galaxy. But danger had found them anyway. The Dominion had arrived with 400 warships. They were conquerors. They moved from world to world, taking everything of value and destroying everything else. In 2,000 years, they had wiped out 11 entire species. Whole civilizations had disappeared because of them. The galaxy feared them more than any other threat. Now they had come to Seven, and they had nowhere to run. Ambassador stood before the Galactic Council, her feathers shaking with fear and anger. She was old for her kind, nearly 60 years, and she had spent her whole life believing that the Council would protect the weak. Now she was learning a hard truth. 17 times I have asked for help, she said, her voice breaking. 17 times. My people are being rounded up like animals. They are putting them in camps. They are separating families. Children are crying for their parents. She looked around the great chamber at all the different species who had gathered there. Some would not meet her eyes. The fleet has 400 ships, she continued. We have nothing. We are miners. We dig rocks from the ground. How are we supposed to fight warships? Prime shifted in his seat. He was a being made of living crystal, ancient and wise, and he had seen many terrible things in his 3,000 years of life. But wisdom did not always mean courage. Ambassador, he said carefully, the Council understands your pain, but we must be realistic. They are too powerful. Any fleet we send would be destroyed. We would lose thousands of our own people. So you will let my people die instead. The silence that followed was the loudest sound it ever heard. Then the doors of the chamber opened. Every head turned. Every eye looked. What they saw was a human woman walking toward them with steady steps. She was small by human standards, with short black hair and dark eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She wore a gray uniform with simple markings that showed her rank, Commander. Her name was, and she led the Terran Third Fleet. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only made contact with other species 50 years ago, and most aliens still did not know what to make of them. They came from a world called Earth, a planet so dangerous that other species called it the air was full of oxygen, which was poison to many aliens. The water was everywhere, a substance that could dissolve almost anything. The surface was covered with predators, diseases, and natural disasters. And yet humans had not only survived on this terrible world. They had conquered it. They had spread across its surface, built cities, created technology, and eventually reached for the stars. The aliens of the galaxy did not understand humans. They were too tough, too stubborn, too willing to take risks that made no logical sense. They formed emotional bonds with anything and anyone. They kept deadly predators as pets. They ate food that was poisonous to other species and called it delicious. Most of all, they had a strange habit that confused everyone. They helped people, not for money or power or advantage. They helped because someone needed help. It made no sense. Commander stopped in the center of the chamber and looked around at all the alien faces watching her. We received your signal, she said. Her voice was calm and clear. The Terran Republic is answering. Ambassador felt her heart skip. You will help us. We will. Prime leaned forward, his crystal body making soft chiming sounds. Commander, I must speak plainly. The fleet at Seven numbers 400 warships. Your entire species has perhaps 300 ships in total. You cannot win this fight." Looked at him. There was no fear in her eyes. There was something else, something that made the ancient feel very young and very small. She said, "With respect, you have clearly never seen what humans do when someone hurts the innocent." "This is not about bravery," insisted. "This is about mathematics, about logic, about survival." "No," said, "this is about right and wrong. Children are being separated from their parents. Families are being torn apart. People are suffering." She turned to look at Ambassador, and her expression softened just a little. "My grandmother told me a story when I was young," said. "She said that evil wins when good people do nothing. She said that the measure of a person is not how they act when it is easy, but how they act when it is hard." She looked back at the council. "This is hard. We know that. We know we might lose ships. We know we might lose people. We know we might lose everything." Her voice did not waver. "We are going anyway." She turned and began walking toward the door. Before she reached it, she stopped and looked back over her shoulder. "The Third Fleet leaves in 6 hours. 47 ships, 2,000 crew members. Every single one of them volunteered for this mission when they heard what was happening." Ambassador was crying now, tears running down through her gray feathers. "Why?" she asked. "We cannot pay you. We have nothing to offer you. Why would you risk everything for strangers?" Smiled. It was a sad smile, but also a warm one. "Because you asked for help," she said, "and we heard you." Then she walked out, and the doors closed behind her. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Some called the humans brave. Some called them foolish. Some said they were walking to their deaths. But Ambassador just stood there, watching the closed doors, and for the first time in 11 terrible days, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. 6 hours later, the Terran Third Fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed and disappeared into the void, racing toward a battle that everyone said they could not win. They went anyway. Because that is what humans do. Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and watched the sensor screens with all 4 of his eyes. He was a massive creature covered in hard gray plates like armor. His kind had conquered half the galaxy. They had crushed entire civilizations beneath their feet. They feared nothing. Or so he had believed until this moment. The sensor officer turned to face him, confusion clear on his face. "Supreme Commander, a fleet has just arrived at the edge of the system." "One of ours?" "No, sir, it is. It is the humans." Felt a flicker of amusement. He had heard of humans, a young species from a dangerous world. They were supposed to be tough for their size, stubborn and aggressive, but they were still just one small species with a tiny fleet. "How many ships?" he asked. The sensor officer hesitated. 47, Supreme Commander." The bridge crew began to laugh. The sound filled the command center, harsh and mocking. 47 ships against 400. This was not a battle. This was a joke. "They are hailing us," the communications officer reported, still laughing. "They probably wish to discuss terms of surrender." "Open the channel," said. "Let us hear what these foolish creatures have to say." The main flickered to life and saw his first human. She was small, so very small. They were over 3 meters tall, built like mountains of muscle and bone. This human woman could not have been more than half that height. She had dark hair cut short and dark eyes that seemed to reflect the light in a strange way. She sat in a command chair, her posture relaxed, as if she were sitting in her own home rather than facing certain death. Behind her stood other humans. A tall man with terrible scars on his neck, a woman with her hands resting on a weapons console, dozens of others, all watching the screen with that same unsettling calm. "Commander," the small woman said, her voice was steady. "I am commander of the Terran Republic. You have attacked a colony under our protection. You will withdraw your forces immediately. You will release all prisoners without harm. You will surrender yourself for trial. This is your only warning." For a long moment could only stare. Then he began to laugh and his crew laughed with him. The sound echoed through the bridge, loud and cruel. 47 ships threaten 400, said when he could speak again. Little human, your species is new to this galaxy. You do not understand how things work here. The strong take what they want. The weak die. This is the natural order. The human woman did not laugh. She did not smile. She simply looked at him, and something in her eyes made the laughter die in his throat. "No," she said, "you do not understand how we work." She leaned forward in her chair. "Let me tell you about my world, Commander. We call it Earth. Other species call it because almost everything there can kill you. Our air is full of a gas that burns. Our water can dissolve metal. Our sun sends radiation that causes our cells to change and die." Her voice was calm, almost gentle, like she was explaining something to a child. "We evolved alongside monsters, great creatures with teeth and claws, fast and strong and hungry. Do you know what we did to them, Commander? We hunted them. We did not have armor like you. We did not have natural weapons. We had soft skin and blunt teeth and small bodies." She paused. "But we had something else. We had endurance. We could chase our prey for days without stopping. We could keep going when any other creature would collapse and die. And we had minds that could plan, and hands that could build, and hearts that would not quit." The bridge of the eternal conquest had gone very quiet. "We hunted those monsters to extinction," continued. "Some of them we kept as pets. We took the deadliest predators on our world and made them our friends. We tamed everything that tried to kill us." She stood up from her chair and took a step toward the screen. "Every human on these ships is a volunteer. Every single one of them knew they might die today. They came anyway. Do you know why?" Found that he could not speak. "Because there are children on that planet who are crying for their parents. Because there are families being torn apart. Because innocent people are suffering and someone asked us for help." Her voice dropped to something cold, something hard. "We are not afraid of you, Commander. We have looked death in the face since we first crawled out of the mud 1,000,000 years ago. Death is an old friend to humanity. We have walked beside it our whole existence." She smiled then, and it was not a kind smile. "But I do not think death is your friend. I think you have never truly faced it. I think you have only ever fought the weak, the helpless, the people who could not fight back." She sat back down in her chair. "Today you fight us. Today you learn what it means to face a species that would rather die than surrender. Today you learn why the galaxy should never, ever make humans angry." The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. No one moved. The laughter from before seemed like a distant memory. Finally, the sensor officer broke the silence. His voice was shaking. "Supreme Commander, the human ships are moving. They are accelerating toward our position. They are forming a defensive line." "No, sir, they are attacking all 47 ships. They are coming directly at us." Felt something he had not felt in 200 years of conquest. It was small and cold, and it lived in his stomach. It was fear. "That is impossible," he said. "No species attacks when outnumbered 8-1. No logical creature would choose certain death." The tactical officer looked up from his console. His face was pale. "Supreme Commander, they are not slowing down. They are not changing course. They are accelerating to maximum combat speed." On the 47 small points of light were growing larger, coming closer, moving faster. "Sir," the communications officer said, his voice barely a whisper, "we are picking up a transmission from their ships. It is music. They are playing music." "Music." "It sounds like singing war songs. They are singing as they attack." Stared at the screen, watching those tiny ships race toward his massive fleet, and he understood something that changed everything. The humans were not coming to win. They were coming to make the pay for every life they had taken. They were coming to show the galaxy that evil would not go unpunished. They were coming to die, yes, but to die on their feet, fighting, taking as many enemies with them as they could. They were not soldiers. They were something far more dangerous. They were humans. All ships, commanded, and his voice did not sound like his own. Battle formations, prepare to engage. The Battle of Seven was about to begin. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Battle of Seven began at exactly 3:47 hours, ship time. It would last for 18 hours, and it would become the most studied military engagement in galactic history. Not because of its size. There had been larger battles, not because of the weapons used. There had been more destructive conflicts. The Battle of Seven would be remembered because it showed the galaxy something they had never seen before. It showed them how humans fight. The Terran Third Fleet did not stop at a safe distance to exchange fire. They did not form defensive formations. They did not try to protect themselves. They charged. 47 ships dove straight into the heart of 400 enemy warships like wolves attacking a herd of cattle. They moved so fast and so aggressively that the targeting systems could not track them. They wove between the massive enemy dreadnoughts, getting so close that the bigger ships could not fire without hitting each other. Commander stood on the bridge of the TRS Indomitable, watching the battle unfold on her tactical display. Her face was calm. Her voice was steady. "Focus fire on their command ships," she ordered. "Make them panic, make them fear." Lieutenant worked the weapons console with practiced hands. The scars on his neck were from a battle 3 years ago when his previous ship had been destroyed around him. He had floated in space for 6 hours before rescue came, his suit leaking air, his body freezing. He had survived through pure stubbornness. "Firing main batteries," he reported. "Target destroyed, moving to next target." An explosion rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed. A damage control officer shouted that the forward shields were failing. "Get us closer," ordered. The helmsman looked at her with wide eyes. "Closer, Commander, if we lose shields. Then their weapons will not be able to track us at this range. Trust me, closer." The Indomitable dove forward, so close to a destroyer that they could see the individual windows on its hull. At this distance, combat became something primitive, something brutal. It was not the clean, distant warfare that most species practiced. It was knife fighting in a dark room. And humans were very, very good at knife fighting. They had never faced an enemy like this. Their tactics were built around keeping distance, using their superior numbers to overwhelm opponents through sheer firepower. But the humans would not stay at distance. They kept coming closer, always closer, until the formation began to break apart as ships tried to avoid hitting their own allies. On the flagship, Supreme Commander screamed orders that no one could follow. His perfect formation had dissolved into chaos. Human ships were everywhere, moving too fast, hitting too hard, appearing from angles that should have been impossible. "Why will they not die?" he roared. Kill them all." But the humans would not die, or rather they died, but they kept fighting anyway. The TRS Horizon took a direct hit to its reactor. The ship was doomed. Everyone on board knew it. Captain, a quiet man who wrote poetry in his spare time, made a decision in the span of a single heartbeat. He ordered all non-essential crew to the escape pods. Then he aimed his dying ship at the nearest carrier and pushed the engines to maximum. The Horizon crashed into the carrier's hangar bay at full speed. The explosion destroyed both ships instantly. It also destroyed 17 fighters that had been preparing to launch. Captain's last transmission was recorded and would be played at memorial services for years to come. It was simple, just 4 words spoken in a calm voice. "For Earth, for honor." This happened again and again. Human ships that were too damaged to fight found ways to keep fighting. They rammed enemy vessels. They overloaded their reactors. They fired their weapons until the barrels melted. They simply refused to stop. But the space battle was only half of the conflict. On the surface of 7, another kind of war was being fought. Sergeant led a team of 12 Terran Marines on a night drop directly into the prison camp. They fell from the sky in drop pods, screaming through the atmosphere at speeds that would have killed any other species. The pods hit the ground hard enough to leave craters, and the Marines were fighting before the dust settled. They had 300 warriors guarding the camp. They were armored, armed, and ready for anything. Except humans. The Marines moved through the camp like shadows. They did not fight fair. They did not give the enemy a chance to organize. They hit hard, hit fast, and kept moving before they could respond. They used the darkness as a weapon. They used fear as a weapon. They used everything they had. Sergeant was hit by a plasma bolt during the assault. It took her left arm off at the elbow. She looked down at the wound, looked at the enemy still standing in front of her, and pulled her sidearm with her remaining hand. "I have another arm," she said. She kept fighting for another hour. By dawn, the camp was liberated. 800 colonists walked free, crying and laughing and unable to believe what had happened. They had been prepared to die. They had said goodbye to each other, and then humans had fallen from the sky and saved them. 9 Marines walked out of that camp. 3 were carried by their comrades, wrapped in flags, their service complete. The others were wounded, exhausted, covered in blood and dust and burn marks. A young child approached Sergeant. The little one's feathers were dirty and matted, and she was shaking with fear. But she reached out with one small hand and touched the sergeant's face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for coming." Knelt down, wincing at the pain in her missing arm, and gently touched the child's head. "We heard you calling," she said. "We always come when someone needs help." "Why?" Smiled, even though she was tired and hurting, and had lost friends that night. "Because that is who we are." Above them, the space battle was reaching its end. The fleet was breaking. Ships were surrendering. Ships were fleeing. The impossible had happened. 47 human ships had broken 400 warships. The cost was terrible. 19 Terran ships destroyed, 12 more damaged beyond repair, over 4,000 humans dead, but they had won. They had saved the colony. They had done what everyone said was impossible. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Commander finally sat down in her chair. She had been standing for 18 hours. Her legs were shaking. Her voice was hoarse from shouting orders. Lieutenant approached her with a cup of water. "Commander, it is over. They are retreating." Took the water and drank deeply. Then she looked at the tactical display, at the wreckage of so many ships, human and alike, floating in the darkness. "Send a message to the colony," she said. "Tell them they are safe. Tell them help has arrived." She paused. "And tell them we are sorry it took so long." On 7, the colonists received the message. They gathered in the streets, looking up at the sky, watching the distant flashes of light that marked the end of the battle. And for the first time in many terrible days, they sang. Songs of hope, songs of gratitude, songs of a future they had thought they would never see. The humans had come for them. The humans had bled for them. The humans had won. The news of the Battle of 7 spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species, every government, every military commander had heard the story, and none of them could believe it. 47 ships against 400. The numbers were impossible. The outcome was impossible. Everything about it was impossible. And yet it had happened. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. Representatives from 100 different species crowded into the Great Chamber, all of them talking at once, all of them asking the same questions. How had this happened? What did it mean? What were the humans really? Prime stood at the center of the chamber, trying to bring order to the chaos. His crystalline body glowed with stress, patterns of light racing across his surface. "Please," he said, his voice amplified to fill the room. "Please, we must discuss this calmly." "Calmly?" shouted representative of his insect wings buzzing with agitation. "The humans have broken do you understand what that means? They have conquered for 2,000 years. They destroyed 11 species, and a fleet of 47 human ships has shattered them." "The losses were significant," another voice said. This was Trade Minister of the Merchant Guild, a small creature who always thought in terms of numbers. "The humans lost nearly half their fleet, over 4,000 dead. By any reasonable calculation, this was a Pyrrhic victory." Ambassador stepped forward. Her feathers were clean now, no longer matted with stress and fear. She stood tall, her eyes bright. "A Pyrrhic victory," she repeated. "Minister, my people are alive. 800 colonists who were waiting to die are now free. Children who had been separated from their parents are back in their arms. How do you calculate the value of that?" Shifted uncomfortably, but did not answer. "The Supreme Commander is dead," continued. "His flagship was boarded by human Marines, 16 of them against a crew of thousands. The security recordings were recovered." She gestured, and a holographic display activated in the center of the chamber. It showed the interior of a warship, dark corridors lit by emergency lights. Then the wall exploded inward, and humans poured through the gap. They moved like nothing the Council had ever seen. Fast, coordinated, utterly without fear. Warriors twice their size fell before them. The humans worked together like parts of a single machine, each one protecting the others, each one pushing forward no matter what. One human took a wound that should have killed him. He kept fighting. Another was thrown against a wall hard enough to dent the metal. She got up and charged back into the battle. A third was surrounded by enemies and out of ammunition. He used his empty weapon as a club. The recording ended with the human standing over the body of Supreme Commander. They were wounded, bleeding, exhausted, but they were alive. The council chamber was silent. "This is what humans are," Ambassador said quietly. "This is what comes from they do not stop, they do not quit, they do not surrender." "They are dangerous," said, but his voice had lost its anger. Now it was closer to awe. "They fight without logic, without reason, without any concern for their own survival." "No," said a new voice. "They fight with the greatest logic of all." Everyone turned. Captain had entered the chamber. He was a young human, barely 30 years old by their counting, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. He had stayed behind when the Third Fleet departed, serving as a liaison between the Terran Republic and the Council. "What logic?" Prime asked. Walked to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. "The logic of values," he said. "The logic of meaning. You see, most species in this galaxy have evolved to survive. Survival is your highest goal. Everything else comes second." He looked around at the alien faces watching him. "Humans are different. We evolved on a world where survival was never guaranteed. Death was always close, always waiting. So we had to find something more important than survival. We had to find something worth dying for." "And what is that?" asked. "Each other." Smiled a small and sad smile. "We bond with anything. Other humans, animals, sometimes even machines. We form connections, attachments, loyalties that go deeper than logic can explain. And when someone we care about is in danger, we stop thinking about survival. We stop thinking about odds. We stop thinking about anything except protecting them." He paused. "You asked why we fought at 7. You want to understand our tactics, our strategy, our motivation. But you are asking the wrong questions." "What is the right question?" "The right question is, what kind of species hears a cry for help from strangers they have never met and decides that those strangers are worth dying for?" No one answered. "We do not fight for conquest," continued. "We do not fight for power or wealth or territory. We fight because someone is suffering. We fight because someone is afraid. We fight because a child is crying for her mother, and we cannot bear to hear that cry go unanswered. He looked directly at Prime. You call us dangerous. You are right. We are extremely dangerous. We are the most dangerous species in this galaxy because we have no limit. There is nothing we will not sacrifice, nothing we will not risk, nothing we will not do to protect the innocent. His voice hardened. But we are only dangerous to those who prey on the weak. We are only dangerous to the conquerors and the slavers and the tyrants. If you are kind, if you are just, if you treat others with dignity and respect, you have nothing to fear from humanity. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. They learned this lesson today. They learned it at the cost of 361 ships and the life of their supreme commander. They learned that there is a price for cruelty, and that humanity will collect that price no matter what it costs us. He looked back over his shoulder. Other species would be wise to remember this lesson. The galaxy is changing. The old ways, the ways of conquest and domination, are ending. Humanity is here now, and we will not stand by while the innocent suffer. Then he was gone, and the council chamber erupted into 100 different conversations in 100 different languages. But Ambassador did not join the discussions. She stood quietly, thinking about what she had seen and heard, thinking about the humans who had come when no one else would, thinking about the Marines who had fallen from the sky to save her people, thinking about Commander, who had smiled sadly and said, "Because you asked for help." She understood now. She understood what humans were. They were not warriors, not really. They were not conquerors or dominators. They were something far older and far more powerful. They were protectors. And the galaxy would never be the same. 10 years passed after the Battle of Seven. In that time, the galaxy changed more than it had in the previous 1,000 years. The Dominion fell apart like a house built on sand. Without their supreme commander, without their reputation for invincibility, they had nothing to hold them together. The species they had conquered rose up against them. The slaves they had taken broke their chains. Within 5 years, they had retreated to their home system, a broken people afraid to look at the stars. They never attacked another world again. The Collective was the first non-human species to formally ally with the Terran Republic. Ambassador signed the treaty herself, her feathers gray with age but her eyes bright with joy. She had lived to see her people saved. She had lived to see a new future begin. Other species followed. The race who had once called humans dangerous requested protection treaties. The crystalline beings of Prime's world opened diplomatic relations. Even the merchant guild, who cared only for profit, began seeking trade agreements with Earth. They did not ally with humanity out of fear. They allied because they had seen something they had never seen before in the galaxy: hope. Commander retired from military service after 7. The battle had taken something out of her, something she could not name but could feel in her bones. She had led 4,000 people to their deaths. She had watched 19 ships burn. She had won, yes, but victory had a price that never stopped being paid. She moved to a small colony world far from Earth, a quiet place with green hills and blue skies. She built a house with her own hands. She planted a garden. She tried to find peace. But she could not escape what she had become. People came to see her. Young humans who wanted to join the military, aliens who wanted to understand, reporters who wanted her story. She turned most of them away, but she could not turn away the children. They came from all over the galaxy, young ones of a dozen different species. Some were orphans from worlds that had attacked. Some were refugees from conflicts that still burned in distant systems. Some were simply curious, wanting to meet the legendary commander. She taught them. She told them stories of Earth, of humanity's long struggle to survive on a deadly world. She taught them about courage and sacrifice and the importance of protecting those who could not protect themselves. Why do humans fight? A young child asked her one day. The little one had survived the siege of 7, had been one of the colonists the Marines had rescued from the prison camp. Thought for a long moment before answering. We do not fight because we want to, she said. We fight because someone has to. We fight because there are people in this universe who use their strength to hurt others, and someone must stop them. But are you not afraid? Always smiled. Fear is natural. Fear keeps us alive. But there are things more important than being alive. There is being kind, being brave, being the person who stands between the monster and the child. She touched the little one's feathered head gently. We are all afraid, but we go anyway. That is what makes us human. Far away on 7, a monument stood in the center of the rebuilt colony. It was simple, just a pillar of white stone, carved with words in both Terran Standard and the language. They came when no one else would. Below the words were names, 4,137 names, every human who had died at the Battle of 7. The colonists had insisted on learning every name, every story. They held memorial services every year on the anniversary of their liberation. They taught their children about the humans who had fallen from the sky. Sargent came to the monument sometimes. She had survived the ground assault, had lived through losing her arm, had healed as much as she would ever heal. She wore a prosthetic now, metal and plastic shaped like a hand. It worked well enough. She always brought flowers, earth flowers, grown in a special garden maintained by the colony. She placed them at the base of the monument, one for each of the 3 Marines who had died under her command. I miss you, she would whisper. I think about you every day. I hope I made you proud. The galaxy continued to change. New alliances formed. Old empires crumbled. Species that had lived in fear for generations began to stand tall, knowing that they were not alone anymore. Not everyone was happy about this change. There were still conquerors in the galaxy, still predators who saw other species as prey. They watched the rise of humanity with anger and fear. Some tried to stop it. Some tried to fight back. They failed every single time. Because humans were everywhere now. Not as conquerors, but as protectors. They built space stations in dangerous regions where travelers could find safety. They sent medical ships to worlds struck by disease. They trained peacekeepers and taught them to be brave. And whenever a distress signal called out from the darkness, whenever someone cried for help, the humans answered. They always answered. Prime lived for another 500 years after the Battle of 7. In all that time, he never forgot the day the humans came to the council chamber. He never forgot the small woman who had looked at him without fear and said, "You have clearly never seen what humans do when someone hurts the innocent." He gave a famous speech near the end of his long life. It was taught in schools across the galaxy, quoted by philosophers and historians. The most famous part came at the end. "I have lived for 3,000 years," said, his crystalline body glowing softly in the light. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have seen species born and die. I thought I understood the universe. I thought I knew all the patterns, all the rules, all the ways that power worked." He paused and his light flickered. "Then the humans came, and they taught me that I knew nothing." He looked out at his audience, thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds. In the vast silence between stars, only one truth is absolute. When humanity hears a cry for help, they answer. They come with their small ships and their soft bodies and their stubborn hearts. They come knowing they might die. They come anyway. His voice dropped to something soft, something like wonder. And heaven help those who made the innocent cry, because the humans will not stop. They will not quit. They will cross the entire galaxy, burn through every obstacle, sacrifice everything they have to protect those who cannot protect themselves. He stood, his crystalline form catching the light. This is what humans are. This is what they have always been, not the strongest species, not the most advanced, but the most determined, the most loyal, the most willing to suffer for others. He smiled, something he had rarely done in 3,000 years. The galaxy is lucky to have them. And somewhere in a small house on a quiet colony world, Commander sat in her garden and watched the sunset. She was old now, her hair gray, her hands wrinkled with age. But her eyes were still sharp, still full of the fire that had carried her through the Battle of Seven. A communication device beeped softly, a message from Earth. She picked it up and read the words on the screen. Distress signal received. Colony under attack. Fleet being DISBATCHED. She smiled and set the device down. Somewhere, another fleet was racing toward another battle. More humans were risking their lives for strangers they had never met. The cycle continued, as it always had, as it always would. Because that was what humans did. They heard the cry. And they answered. Always.